Good morning, Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Living in Mexico. Boy, I know we've been throughout the last 2 or 3 months, we've been following very closely a lot of news that has to do with Mexican politics. As you know, Mexico, President Claudia Sheinbaum has been trying to reform the electoral system in Mexico up to now unsuccessfully, but very interesting reforms being presented. Of course, there's been a lot of issues that we've been following very closely on the show. This has to do with security and corruption. But today we have a treat. We're going to stop for a second, and we're going to go back to an issue that I, throughout the years, at least since October, November 2022, have been trying to focus at least every now and this on the show, which has to do with artificial intelligence. Remember, I used to have every other weekend, I would seek out someone to interview to talk about the future of AI, where this technology will more likely have impact on communities, on the world, on Mexico. Well, we stopped doing that because just we were focusing so much on politics, economy, and security issues in Mexico, but we have to go back to it. And that's why I'm so excited to welcome today's guest. He is Dr. Vivek Mohindra. He is the Special Advisor to Vice Chairman at Dell Technologies. I had the opportunity to participate with you, Vivek, on a panel at the U.S. Mexico Chamber this week, and I just thought, wow, it would be such an opportunity to speak to you and share part of that conversation with our audience, in which you really laid out in such a marvelous way, where are we with AI in general, and two, how potentially this could impact Mexico towards the future, as Mexico is developing a nationwide policy as to how at least the Mexican government is going to use is going to use AI. So welcome to the show, Vivek.
Thank you, Anna. It's great to see you again. I know it's a treat for me. I know we got a chance to speak a couple of days ago and be on the panel, and we had a broad-ranging discussion, and I'm delighted to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
So, let's start from the beginning. And I know I had commented this on the panel, but in October of 2022, when ChatGPT just came online, and there was a lot of conversations in terms of what AI meant for humanity. I mean, was AI going to be kind of this Terminator scenario where we would have robots eating babies, and that would be the end of humanity or the world as we know it? Or were we thinking about a model that finally we would we would find the way to use technology as a way of decreasing inequality, providing services to the most needed, trying to combat better climate change, finding ways to heal people, better medical services. I mean, there was a lot of hopes and a lot of expectations, and then there was this third conversation, or this third model, in which actually technology would become one more way for the richest or countries who had access to resources, or people who had access to resources, would get richer and will have access to more opportunities, and those who were poorer would become poorer. I mean, so where are we with with AI from your perspective?
Yeah, and I think this is one of those interesting discussions that always comes up, no matter what the topic related to AI is, because it has profound implications for a lot of us. I come from a more optimistic end of the spectrum, supported by facts, and of course, supported by my personality, which is generally more optimistic. But when I zoom out and look at how the world has evolved and the AI world has evolved since the ChatGPT moment of November 2022, as we discussed, we have moved from ChatGPT to more pervasive Gen AI applicable to a whole range of fields, including software coding, to now agentic system and multi-agentic systems. And when you look at the evolution of AI in that context, my personal view is that it lowers the barriers for a workforce participation in a very meaningful way. So to give you an example, in the old days, if you will, if you wanted to be a software engineer, you had to go to a 4-year college. Perhaps you
Right.
had to go get a master's degree, and then you could embark on software engineering profession. But now with these coding agents that are available, which can really work very closely with people who are just innately curious, and many a times do not need a college education. You can imagine a world where all of a sudden people with high school education, maybe a couple of years of college equivalent or community college equivalent in the United States, they can suddenly, coupled with their imagination, use these tools to create new kind of products and start doing coding. And what that does, it then reduces the barriers for entry into these higher paying professions in a very, very meaningful way. Same thing is occurring in the world of content creation and management as well, because there are all these tools that are now available, which lower the barrier for a lot of people to get into that. So that's at a very tactical level. And I think, as we discussed, I'm also a student of history. When you go back and look at the current status of jobs in the world, 60% of the roles that exist in the world today did not exist in 1940. 85% of the new roles that have been created in the last 80 years have come about on the back of technology innovation. And the world abounds with examples. For example, you and I discussed on the stage, when spreadsheets came along, a lot of people who were just adding numbers and were called human calculators, their roles, of course, disappeared. But an entire new profession around financial planning came into existence that people had not even imagined. So I personally subscribe more to this AI will be a force for good because it will lower the barrier for a lot of workforce participation, which is hugely important for a country like Mexico with younger population, and unleash a whole additional wave of value creation, not only for the country, but also for people across the entire spectrum of income, if you will. And it'll be a force for good for reducing income inequality in the end.
Joining us today here on Living in Mexico is Dr. Vivek Mohindra. He is a special advisor to the vice chairman at Dell Technologies. But more importantly, you are in charge of Dell Technologies policies and decisions regarding artificial intelligence, Vivek. But there still is this sense out there, if you're looking at the pessimistic side of this, or if you're looking at this from the dark side of the moon, the that artificial intelligence, as you use it and as it's being developed, is running the risk of replacing a lot of workers. Replacing humans, I think, is kind of the big fear. So as you were talking about spreadsheets, I was thinking in the back of my mind, yeah, but I'm sure a lot of accountants must be very nervous in terms of, after all those years and all that knowledge and all that work, that they suddenly would not, that one of the careers that could not disappear, but that there would be the need for less professionals would be, for example, accountants or lawyers. Some people were even talking about not necessarily all doctors, but certain doctors with certain specialization. So, I mean, there is this sense that, that AI, that we run the risk of AI opening up opportunities for certain group of people, but also closing opportunities for others, particularly for certain professionals.
Well, I think it's entirely understandable. I know you're a trained Harvard Law School lawyer as well, so I know this profession is near and dear to your heart too. I'll tell you, I think it's an entirely understandable sentiment, but I think here's the reality. So, for example, 4 weeks ago I was in India, or 3 weeks ago, I lose track at this point, but at the AI Impact Summit. And I met with one of the innovative law firms in India, and I had this discussion with the managing partner of that law firm. Um, Interestingly, their demand has increased significantly for their services because the nature of issues and the topics has become much more complicated. And AI cannot substitute for the judgment and the experiential requirements for interpreting what the implications are. In the legal domain itself, let's just take that as an example. In the legal domain itself, you now have real relevant questions around intellectual property protection.
Right.
You have questions around what is patentable and what is not patentable as new ways of using these tools come about. This company was telling me that they have a whole set of clients which are cross culture, across countries, who are also now grappling with the infrastructure deployment and the issues therein, and of course, related to some of the supply chain related matters too. So, and it just struck me that it's entirely understandable for people to be worried about what they do. But like with any technology, all roles get impacted, and perhaps with AI in a bigger way. Some roles, like in my spreadsheet examples, like calculators, those roles will disappear. There will be entirely
Right.
new types of roles that come about. Like, prompt engineering 2 years ago, people were talking about prompt engineer. That profession did not exist. Then it rapidly moved to context engineering. And now people are talking about harness engineering for using these software tools, these professions that we had not even heard about 3 years ago. But at an overall level, and I know Michael Dell has been asked this question as well. And by the way, Michael Dell is ultimately, and Jeff Clark, our vice chair CEO, they are the ones who drive our AI related policies and strategies across the company. But Michael has been asked that question, and I subscribe to his views, which is, look, 90% of it will be good in that it will create new roles and it will augment a whole set of new or existing roles in a very meaningful, different way. But it will require us to all change. It will require us to incorporate these new tools and learn them and use them. That is something that we'll have to do. But I am much more on the optimistic end of the spectrum there.
So talking about lawyers, one of the issues, and we can now start looking at what's happening in Mexico. One of the issues when in November of I'm in November 22, and I remember still in January, February, March, as we were talking about AI in Mexico in my on my radio show and on my TV shows. I mean, it was interesting trying to find experts in Mexico that could talk about AI in terms of how AI could eventually benefit Mexico. And much of the discussion that was taking place in 2023 was around the need to regulate AI. And of course, it was a reflection of what was happening in Europe. The European Union had a huge discussion and debate. Even in the United States, if you recall, there was a discussion during the Biden administration where there was, the decision was to implement, this was between 23 and 24, was to implement a strategy, an AI strategy, very also focused on making sure that the right regulations were in place. So I guess my question for you, and as the Mexican legislators at least were able to sign on to some type of legislation, do regulations work? I mean, can you really control AI?
Think controlling is a strong word,
Right.
Anna, but I do believe that government has a key role to play and regulations have a key role to play, if nothing but for very practical reasons. Any given company, whether it's small or large, and I know Mexico has 25,000 entrepreneurs, and small and medium enterprises is a big source of job creation in Mexico as well. Any given company operates in a context which have to adhere to the local regulations, state regulations, national regulations, and international regulations. So regulations have a role to play to provide certainty to businesses so they can actually operate with certainty. I mean, that's one end of the spectrum. Second, for these newer technologies like AI, there's always a risk of over-regulating as well. And I have a lot of sympathy for regulators because their roles are not easy, because you always have to strike the balance between innovation and capitalizing on a new technology and versus drawing the boundaries in terms of the risks and other implications of that. Now, over the last 3 days, as I've had various meetings in Mexico, I have walked away very optimistic about the recognition by regulators of this need for this balance. And at least my advice to them has been that government has a key role to play beyond regulations, but regulations are an important point. Let's make sure that the boundary between innovation end of the spectrum and capitalizing on this transformative technology, which can be hugely impactful for Mexico, that is balanced with the other side in terms of the risks that you have to manage and mitigate too. Regulations definitely have a role to play.
So let's talk, just looking at Mexico and where Mexico is in terms of development, technical development, you know, and in the middle of discussing and the future of the USMCA, which is this commercial agreement with the United States and Canada, and has been a very strong factor of Mexico's development in the last 30 years. Well, these commercial agreements, but you know, there's also the reality that Mexico does have infrastructure problems. It does, you know, there is parts of the country where they still don't have internet. I think there may be still some parts of the country where there is no electricity, no running water. I mean, you know, there's just this, you know, there is, you know, the level of development has not gone as fast, I think, as many had hoped. Mexico hasn't developed as fast as many had hoped in the last 30 years. So, you know, it just raises the question as to when the Mexican government thinks about an AI policy and what should be the priorities. It's difficult to figure out how, you know, what role they're going to play, whether they can actually push their priorities onto the private sector, which ultimately is going to have to develop these policies. And you know, you do run the risk, and I think there is some concern that you do run the risk that there are few will benefit, but not enough to show and reflect how AI can help a country like Mexico to develop. So I guess the first question would be, what should Mexico be doing to enable the use as an AI as a factor of development?
I think, Anna, my view is that at least when I looked at these numbers before I visited, I was struck. I think like the internet usage is really high. I think it was in the 80s. So penetration is really good. When you looked at the strengths that Mexico has, you know, starting with the geographic proximity to the United States, it's number one trading partner, and United States number one trading partner. Its huge role in Latin America. The bilateral agreements it's already struck with a whole range of other countries, the great number of skillful people that are graduating from Mexico. So, and then of course, these small and medium enterprises and entrepreneurs that I referred to earlier. So Mexico has a very strong base upon which it can build upon. But it requires a few things. I think it first requires a very coherent AI plan to say, okay, where can Mexico best derive these advantages from AI? The first element of that, and this is what I think I may have briefly alluded in our last conversation as well, is this the notion of an AI blueprint that Dell have released for various countries with some customization based on a country's particular place and its strengths. But for example, when I think about Mexico, I think infrastructure is a big part that the government should focus on. You know, there's the three pillars of the plan briefly are to invest, innovate, and evolve. Investments around energy and compute infrastructure. Innovation is all around how the government itself operates and the skilling part of it. And evolve is more around an agile regulatory framework as well as a cybersecurity posture. So one of the first things I think Mexico can do is invest in infrastructure because, you know, without infrastructure, AI is just an aspiration, and infrastructure is a key enabler of realizing that value. And do it in a way in close partnership, in a public-private partnership model, so involve the private sector in it, but do it in a way that it also allows access to small and medium enterprises at affordable prices in terms of accessing AI, because that will help level the playing field some between the larger and the smaller companies, and frankly will be a key enabler of driving the job growth and economic value creation, which is driven by SMEs. So that is one key role the government can play. Second is figure out, just like we do in businesses, figure out what the AI strategy is in support of the business strategy that we do in the business world. I think at least my advice would be for Mexico government to decide what the priority sectors are and the priority areas are. Clearly, things like healthcare, financials, financial institutions, manufacturing. Those are some that I heard about in my last 3 days. Those seem to be pretty important sectors. But with that, I think then the government, I think the third thing, my recommendation would be to lay down this public-private sector model is to articulate what the role of the private sector would be, what the role of the public sector, government would be, and what the role of the academic sector would be. And with that clarity, I suspect Mexico will make huge strides in realizing the benefits of it for its citizens.
And of course, I was thinking in terms of enabling artificial intelligence in Mexico as a way of pushing Mexico into development, and being able to better use the USMCA, these commercial agreements with the United States, which is, I think AI is actually going to be it should be playing a very important role in exports to the US, one way or the other. But it also raises a question as to what should Mexico be doing to make sure that they have a workforce that knows and can benefit from AI.
Yes, I absolutely. And I think this is where my view is that AI skilling to enable the workforce is a hugely important element of that. And it really resides at three levels. The first is just the pre-high school education. So, and this is where, again, the government has a key role to play to articulate what the standards should be around AI skilling and AI education at that level. The second is at the university level. So that does require a different level. Again, being able to articulate what the standards are and working closely with the academic institutions in Mexico. And the third level of skilling is the folks who are already employed by companies.
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of jobs, AI skilling in the context of a specific role, and then being able to reimagine that role with the tools, with the support of these AI tools becomes really important. And that's where I think, again, the private sector has to step up. And this is another area where the government can play a role. So those are the three areas, but you're absolutely right. I think talent and skills are a huge enabler, and workforce. How do you enable that workforce is a big enabler of being able to capitalize on AI potential. In fact, the three biggest reasons companies are not able to realize the benefit from AI, in our experience and my experience as I've spoken with lots of companies, the top three reasons: what are the AI use cases a company should focus on? The analogy here would be which are the priority sectors for Mexican government. Number two, how do you get the data in shape to be able to extract the value from that? The analogy would be, are the data and the models that Mexican government is putting in place and promoting their use of, do they reflect the cultural identity of Mexico? And the third reason is skills. Companies do not have that talent to be able to capitalize on that. And that's really where the government role also comes into play, just like I described. So similar analogy to what any individual company also deals with.
Joining us today is Vivek Mohindra. He is the Special Advisor to Vice Chairman Dell Technologies. We had met and we had a conversation at the Mexican-American Chamber of Commerce here in Mexico City. And I'm just so glad we're having the opportunity to kind of replay some of the parts of the conversation that we had, Vivek. But one of the issues that came up in our conversation was this idea of AI, artificial intelligence sovereignty.
Right.
Should countries, aspire for that? And it's a very interesting topic, because from the national security perspective, I'm sure country would feel much safer and would want to control AI versus just having the private sector and international forces kind of pushing the way AI develops. But what's your position on that?
Look, sovereign AI comes up in pretty much every discussion I have with any national body in various
Governments,
countries.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, governments, of course. I think it is a very important topic. In fact, when I was at the request of the Department of State, I was at the U.S. mission to United Nations in November, and the ambassador had hosted a dinner with about 12 ambassadors from various countries with various economic resources at their disposal, all the way from those in Africa to actually the Mexican ambassador was there too, and somebody from India was there as well. So sovereign AI is a really important element, and my advice to the governments is to make sure that they have a crisp understanding of sovereign AI, and then they are capitalizing on the strengths that they have as a nation. So, for example, if somebody defines sovereign AI all the way from the base silicon, these GPUs, for example, that NVIDIA just launched a whole new cadre of GPUs a couple of days ago, all the way up to the models and applications, then I think that is a very high bar, because to be able to develop those base layers of the infrastructure indigenously, it takes, not only does it take a lot of time, but frankly, it takes a lot of money. And the pace at which this technology is moving, if a country focuses on the definition of sovereign AI and being able to control the entirety of that at that level,
Yeah.
there's a real risk they would be left behind.
Mhm.
My view is, again, when you look at the infrastructure itself, that would be defined, for example, with compute and storage, or that layer. A country should buy the best of the breed and implement that. But the majority of the economic interlock really comes about from the upper layers of that, which really revolves around, are the models reflective of your culture and languages? Is the data that you're using to drive it reflective of your culture and languages? And then the application on top of that, that people use on a day-to-day basis, are they allowing you to capitalize on your strengths and realize the benefits? To me, that is a much more nuanced way to think about sovereign AI. And frankly, it also then liberates this issue that we have, because in some of the countries I go to, I speak with, they talk about, hey, do we really need $50 billion per gigawatt type of a data center to be able to capitalize on that? And my point is, no, you don't, because that money would be better spent on these upper layers of the stack. You just buy the infrastructure, control it, meaning you own it and you control it, but then figure out how can you use devices like PCs and phones to empower your population to be able to use some of these models and technologies to really unleash that layer. That is a much, much better way to think about sovereign AI.
Joining us today here on Living in Mexico is Dr. Vivek Mohindra. We had the opportunity to speak at the U.S. Mexico Chamber of Commerce. And one issue that did not come up, Dr. Mohindra, is the issue of cybersecurity. And the reason why I wanted to ask you some questions about it, because I remember, as we were all very excitedly talking about artificial intelligence in 22, 23, the issue of cybersecurity came up. I mean, how secure is artificial intelligence from many perspectives, from the national security perspective, from just information. There's a lot of focus on how AI could actually replace humans, personalities, human information, share the information. I mean, so there's all these concerns that came up. And then, of course, there was the hacking and cyber hacking. And there was kind of a sense that AI could be used to even be more dangerous for the internet infrastructure and privacy and national security information. Then there was a whole other group of people that came up and say, no, 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 actually AI can be one of the biggest tool in cybersecurity, and it can help protect your information and protect your infrastructure. So what is it from your perspective, Vivek?
This is an age-old discussion, Anna, even pre-AI, because with any of these transformative technologies and tools, unfortunately, both sides get it. The bad actors get it, and the good actors get it. And it's a cat and mouse game that has persisted in the technology landscape for decades now. And I think we're seeing that play out some,
Right.
meaning the bad actors have access to these tools and they can turbocharge the nature of the attacks and the sophistication of attacks. And then the unfortunate reality is with some of these newer technologies like agentic technologies, the attack surface has also increased. So there's just more places to attack. But then the good news is that there is a whole range of companies who are now using these tools to defend and to protect as much as they can. And I don't think there's a time where we will be able to step back and declare victory for one camp or the other. Again, I am innately a believer in the goodness of the human race overall. So notwithstanding the bad actors out there, I have a strong belief that there are a lot of individuals and companies who are actively working to keep this technology safe for everyone. And that's really how this is going to play out too.
I wanted to ask you that because as you know, Mexico has suffered massive
Yeah.
hacking of very sensitive national security information, election information, private, personal information in the last 2 years, last 3 years. And it is, there is that concern in terms as Mexico rapidly tries to, especially the government rapidly tries to see AI as a way of providing services in a more efficient manner. It just raises a lot of red flags, which takes me to to your recommendations. Kind of looking at other countries as there's a race to develop AI. What would be your main recommendations for the Mexican government and the Mexican private sector who's interested in becoming part of this?
Yeah, and interestingly, Anna, this was also a topic for my yesterday's talk after our session at the AI Policy or AI Innovation Summit that the U.S. Embassy and the American Chamber of Commerce in Caneti had sponsored yesterday. My view is that there are value shifts occurring. The pace of change has increased dramatically, and there are going to be massive value shifts in this industry. And the value shifts will be across all dimensions. They will be across companies in a given sector, across different sectors, country to country, region to region. So this is how this is going to play out, although we are really early innings. Now, Mexico, in my view, has lots of strengths to play with. So just like with any business strategy, I think the country strategy should be focused on its strengths and being able to figure out, okay, how do you leverage them? So I had mentioned proximity to the US, the largest trading relationship, bilateral relationships elsewhere, great talent pool. It has strong position in the LATAM ecosystem. So with all of those, I think the government, in a strong partnership with the private sector and academia, should focus on which are the priority sectors to go after. How do they clearly define the role of the private sector and the government and the academia in it? define a national AI strategy, which has crisp articulation of the roles for everyone and have timelines attached to those. And then take actions. For example, the cybersecurity is a good example, or the hacks you mentioned. At the heart of these hacks is an inherent non-resilience of the infrastructure upon which a lot of these services are provided. So now, that lack of resilience existed even before AI came about. But with AI, it exposes the vulnerabilities more, which naturally means there is an imperative for the government to innovate along the dimension of upgrading its own digital infrastructure upon which these services are provided. So I think that would be the advice I would offer the Mexican government. And I would my discussion with the private sector were really encouraging as well. I ran into somebody yesterday who talked about setting up several hundred megawatt type of data centers in there. I described to somebody, I think the same discussion came up in our conversation, that what I observed in India, where the Indian government purchased some GPUs and provided access at throwaway rates to the small and medium business enterprises. So those are the types of actions I think Mexico should also contemplate. But there are huge strengths to build upon, and that's really what the focus should be.
And there is this concern. I mean, the issue, for example, of the energy sector. I mean, it's
Right.
hard to imagine AI becoming one of Mexico's push or Mexico's priority in terms of its development policy if we just simply don't have the right energy policy or infrastructure policy or education policy. I mean, it just,
Right.
as I repeat those three words, I just realized, Mexico has a lot of work to do. So do you get the sense that at the end of the day, any major development or advances of Mexico's AI infrastructure is basically going to have to fall in the private sector?
I don't think that's the case. First, the good news, or the bad news, depending upon how you look at it. Uh, every country I go to feels the same way. Because the technology is moving so fast, and
It
all
is.
countries realize that there's a lot of benefit to be had from this. There's a natural feeling that, hey, perhaps we are not moving as fast and we are being left behind. So some of that feeling is not surprising. But again, when I looked at it, I think when I look at the forecast for the AI spending in Mexico, I'm just looking at some numbers, $6.2 billion by 2029. I had looked at the federal government introduced a 5.6 trillion peso public-private partnership investment plan through 2030. There are lots of elements of that. And ultimately, I think all sectors have a role to play. Public sector, private sector, and academia, all acting in concert and unison, because without that, it would be really hard to realize the full benefits of AI.
Vivek, I don't know, we're running out of time. Is there anything else you would like to add for our Living in Mexico audience?
And all I will say is what I saw in the last 3 days in my various meetings and my discussions give me a lot of optimism about
Good.
Mexico's position. And even though it's natural to feel the weight of the here and now issues, and does that mean that perhaps a country is falling behind? I did not walk away from that sentiment at all. I walked away with a lot of enthusiasm from all the people I spoke with a sober-faced realization of the challenges, of course. And the government officials I met with, I was very impressed because they are asking the right questions. They're really keen to learn about from my experiences with other countries. I walked away very optimistic, and I'm really looking forward to coming back there again soon to continue the discussions and have great food again, because I am already beginning to miss the Mexican food.
Well, when you come back, I'm hoping you will join us once again here on Living in Mexico Radio. Dr. Vivek Mohindra, he's Special Advisor to Vice Chairman of Dell Technologies. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us this weekend.
Thank you, Anna, for having me. It's a pleasure to do this.
Thank you. That's it for this special edition of Living in Mexico. Don't forget, we continue to broadcast every Saturday and Sunday from 7 to 8 a.m. here through Grupo Imagen. I'm Ana Maria Salazar, hoping you have a great weekend.